Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Baylor Scott & White's Sports Performance Center, Athletes Made Here. The Sports Performance Center was developed with one goal in mind: to maximize human performance through movement and recovery. Their team of expert performance sports coaches and trainers will guide you to achieve your performance goals. That's the Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, located at the Star in Frisco. This episode is also brought to you by Allen Dental Studio. Located off Bethany Drive in Allen, their office was designed with you, the patient, in mind, which means an excellent and enjoyable experience. From cosmetics to implants, you deserve a perfect smile, and Allen Dental Studio can make that happen. Also, don't want to leave out another longtime friend of the podcast, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. With locations in Carrollton and Dallas, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes offers an affordable, high-quality alternative to senior living. Call now at 469-400-7650. That's Texan, spelled T-E-X-S-E-N, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Bryan Murphy and Devin Hasson. Gentlemen, it is Monday, and as per usual, let's talk some high school football. We are embarking on Week 7, which means up to this point, everybody has played at least 5 games, depending on where you had your bye week earlier in the season. But we do know that everybody has completed, nevertheless, the first half of their regular season schedule. So, with that being said, let's talk, let's just kind of get a cursory glimpse at superlatives. The end of the year superlatives, things like District MVP, Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, those awards that won't be decided for, for quite a few more weeks. But nevertheless, through the first half of the season, how do we kind of see those playing out a bit? Let's just kind of go district by district, 5A and 6A, and just kind of break down some of the names that could very well be in consideration for superlatives when all is said and done. Bryan, we can start over in 5A. And whereas there's some districts where you feel like there might be a 2, 3, 4 horse race, it does feel like we have our MVP selection in 5A Division I pretty much set in stone, barring injury or something completely unforeseen. Because we feel like barring something cataclysmic, it's going to be Marvin Mims.
I was about to say, who are you talking about, Matt? I don't know.
Frisco Lone Star wide receiver Marvin Mims is having and this can just kind of be just a breakdown of just this, what's shaping up to be a really special year for Marvin Mims. Mm-hmm. Not just for him personally, but just as far as just recent wide receiver history in the area. Just already through 5-6 games played, they have, is it just 5 for them? Mm-hmm. That's right, because they had their bye week a couple weeks ago. So for Marvin Mims right now, for those who have not been apprised of this, of just the year that Marvin Mims is having, he has right now through the first half of the season 1,044 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns, an average yards per catch of 26.1. That's more than a quarter of the damn field.
He had a good season in 6 minutes apparently on Friday nights for a lot of receivers.
Man, he in the first 5.5 minutes of that game against Wakeland, he had 3 catches, 198 yards, and 3 touchdowns, including a 93-yard slant, that you only see like Odell Beckham Jr. make, to the house. The dude is electric. He doesn't even lead the district in receiving touchdowns, though.
That is fair.
That's kind of going to get me to, my next list of, 4 or 5 guys that would win MVP in any other district. And I'm not even really including the guy that's the reigning district MVP in Miles Price. He doesn't even have the second or third best stats when it comes to just receiving numbers alone. But the guy I'm alluding to with 13 touchdowns is Keon Wafer at Independence. He has 714 receiving yards, 25 catches as well. And then another guy with double-digit touchdowns is a guy I saw go up against Lone Star and Kevin Rochelle. Mm-hmm. He's got 11 touchdowns on the year. It was 622 receiving yards. This is wide receiver U in District 5A. Oh man, there's so many other guys, that won't, that maybe don't have the super flashy numbers too. Kyle Bradford at Heritage. Trace Bruckler is also at Lone Star. He's a really good receiver. So when Marvin Mims graduates this year, Trace Bruckler, he's going to take over. But man, Marvin Mims, he's such a nice kid too. He's got a right head on his shoulders. He's going
to Stanford.
He's going to Stanford. And then when I talked to him about committing to Stanford, he was talking about how he was swamped in psychology homework the night before and stuff like that. Who is this guy, man? He's just like the perfect kid, man. I don't know. But he's definitely the MVP. But someone's going to get left out of a superlative that deserves it. You know, when I'm talking just a wide receiver in this district, is it going to be Miles Price? Is he going to get Offensive Player of the Year? You know, he's the reason why they beat Centennial, because they could have I'm talking about the Colony. They should have lost or could have lost to Centennial, and then finally in that fourth quarter they were like, all right, Miles Price here, just
do Miles Price
dump pass, 70-yard touchdown, just please save us. You know, I haven't even mentioned Christian Gonzalez, Keith Miller. They're both they're both, you know, Gonzalez going to Purdue, Keith Miller going to Kansas, two, you know, Power 5 programs there. I don't know. Someone's going to get left out. You know, someone's got to get offensive players. Is this going to be a district where they give, you know, 3 offensive player of the years?
We don't think in those terms, even though I know that's the popular thing to do, is to give 3 or 4 different people one superlative. No, that's not how we roll.
It's like with 9-6A girls basketball. They had to give 3 MVPs because they had 3 All-Americans. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying they're All-Americans on this team. Well, Marvin Mims is actually. He's Under Armour All-American. But, you know, they're going to have to figure something out because there's a lot of talent at the wide receiver position.
With Mims, I mean, this is not his first rodeo.
He had 18 touchdowns in the sophomore season.
He's been through the high school football grinder quite a bit. But this year, though, these are numbers ridiculous. That could very well be, I mean, he could very well lead the, I don't know what the state lead right now is in receiving yards. You got to imagine the Mims pretty close. But nevertheless, so you've been covering that program for quite some time. What has been the biggest, what do you attribute to him taking this leap to where he's now just in this different stratosphere from a production standpoint?
Besides the obvious fact that he's a senior now, he's matured, you know, physically and mentally and whatnot. It has a lot to do with Garrett Rangel. Man, Garrett Rangel, we haven't even talked about his numbers, and he's thrown for over 1,600 yards. He has 19 touchdowns, which aren't even the best in the district either for a quarterback. I'll get to that in a second. But, you know, because last year they had Julian Larry, and, you know, he's a phenomenal athlete, but he's a defensive back playing quarterback last year. And, you know, he got the job done, but he didn't put up the throwing numbers like Rangel did. And granted, in Mims' sophomore season, he had MJ Rivers. And MJ Rivers is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. He was phenomenal, and so that kind of led to his good numbers sophomore year. He still had great numbers as a junior, but I think, you know, now he's got a more mature, not a more mature quarterback. He's got a quarterback that can really get him the ball, you know, wherever he wants it, wherever he needs it. I'm not saying Julian Larry didn't do that, but, you know, like I said, that quarterback wasn't his natural position. Now he has a natural quarterback. You know, that offensive line, you know, is more experienced. There's just so many weapons around him now. You know, they have a potent running game that they didn't have last year. And Jake Bogdan, who has been compared to from Jeff Rayburn as a Christian McCaffrey type. I've said that millions of times on this podcast, but, you know, he's another element to that offense that gets overlooked because, you know, you have Rangel, you have Marvin Mims, and then you're like, well, you still have Jake Bogdan, who is having a tremendous season as well. He could be in the MVP case if he was in another district as well. But I think that element of having a running game was also really helping Marvin Mims out because you can't really, because last year their rushing attack, you know, really wasn't all that there, especially in the first half of the season for Lone Star.
Speaking of, I mean, if we're going to call Marvin Mims a stone cold lock or whatever you want to terminology you want to use for MVP, Garrett Rangel surely is the newcomer of the year in this district, right?
Oh yeah, sophomore. Going into the week 1, he wasn't even the clear-cut starter, and then the injury happens to Chandler Galban, and he's the starter, and then he's the stud. They're not worried about it, and he is as good as advertised, if not even better, man. I thought it was funny. Rangel told me after the game against Highland Park when they beat them, you know, emotions were high. He said, man, sometimes I just throw it up to Marvin and just go and get it, man. But he's still throwing 7 other touchdowns to a player not named Marvin Mims. He's still getting the job done. Rangel has been absolutely phenomenal, and I see an MVP in his future. Not this season, obviously, but in the near future for him. But he hasn't been the best quarterback in the district, man. Mikey Harrington's having a good year with the Colony, but Braylon Braxton, man, he's got almost 1,700 passing yards. He's got 25 touchdowns. So he's thrown 12 touchdowns not to Keon Wafer. Also, man, he's putting up ridiculous numbers. And I knew last year he was good as a sophomore, but this year, as a junior, he's making a case for MVP. I don't know what kind of superlative they're going to have to give him, you know, with Mims. I hope they don't do a co-MVP. I hope they do just one MVP because Mims really deserves that. But Braxton has to be somewhere on there, you know. I don't know, Offensive Player of the Year, something. I don't know, but, man.
I feel like him or Miles Price are probably 2 names that immediately jump out as Offensive Player of the Year candidates.
For sure, but he's got to be on there somewhere. He's having a phenomenal year, and he's a dual threat, too. He's not just a pocket passer. He can take off and run. He's a big body, 6'2", over 220 pounds or so. He's a tough guy to bring down, and he's really helped turn that Independence program around. And Independence and Lone Star, they played this week, and that's going to be juicy.
Now, Miles Price was the district MVP last year, correct?
Yes.
And he's been, when the ball is in his hands, great things are happening. He's averaging 10.5 yards per carry on the ground and 18.5 yards per catch through the air.
Yeah, and I've seen them play against Reedy. I've seen them play against Centennial. He single-handedly beat Centennial in the fourth quarter. He single-handedly put Reedy to bed in the first quarter of that game. He made a catch in double coverage, eluded both defenders somehow, and then took it to the house. Miles Price is really electric. And if he was in literally any other district, that didn't have Marvin Mims or maybe a Jackson Smith and Jigba in it, he would be the MVP again. But it's a shame that he probably won't get it this year. And he's really, really good. Going to Texas Tech for a reason.
Bottom line, there's an embarrassment of riches in District 5A Division I. We can look at this 7-5A Division I now, Devin. As we were talking about, Marvin Mims has he has a 267-yard lead over the second leading receiver in the area among 5A programs. Number 2 receiver is J.J. Henry of McKinney North, and that is one of several standouts on the offensive side of the ball for McKinney North, as they are putting up just an absolutely prolific year on offense. They have at least among 5A programs, the area's leading passer in Dylan Markowitz, the area's leading rusher in Manny Fincher, and the number 2 wide receiver in J.J. Henry. And obviously there's still plenty of other credentialed programs in that district. So what is your initial read right now on how the superlative races might be shaking out in the 7th?
I mean, how can you not give it to Dylan Markowitz right now? 2,100 yards and 25 touchdowns and 0 interceptions.
That's the part that impresses me more than anything.
152 pass attempts and 0 interceptions. And obviously you mentioned Manny Fincher, who I was really impressed with last year. He's got the pieces around him, but obviously he's the kind of the cog that makes it go. And so right now, how can you not give him the MVP?
Yeah, I was just trying to parse between him and Fincher, I guess, whose year was, I guess, more impressive, so to speak, so far, because they've both been outstanding. I was just so Manny Fincher, his numbers so far, he's at 1,003 yards, 12 touchdowns. He has I just mentioned the gap between not Jackson Smith-Jigba, but Marvin Mims and J.J. Henry. The gap between Manny Fincher and the second place rusher in the area right now is 280 yards, the gap between first and second is greater than the gap between second and 24th among area running backs. So that just puts in perspective just how much more impressive Manny Fincher has been just from a production standpoint. But the fact that Dylan has not turned the ball over once yet. The fact that he's completing almost 3/4 of his passes. This McKinney North offense, and it's also it's the perfect combination of an offense that has a lot of talent and a really efficient and productive system, but also the circumstances coalesce to where they're going to be productive because they're in so many close games because of the situation on defense that we've talked about in the past. You're going to get these games where you have these programs like Lone Star where they're really only having to play their starters for 2.5 quarters before they start siphoning.
They're going full throttle for the whole game because their defense can't stop it.
It's the perfect situation as far as amassing all those that massive statistical numbers that they have, just when you factor in the circumstances surrounding the program. But obviously, there's other programs that are going to factor into this race. Surely Dylan Markowitz and Manny Fincher are going to somehow work their way into this conversation. But who else is kind of on your radar?
Well, and you may be looking at MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. Since this is Texas OU week, I'll
Boomer Sooner.
Pull in, I'll pull in a couple of guys that are headed that way to those schools. Seth McGowan, Oklahoma pledge over at Poteet, has been banged up early in the season, kind of routing into form as we go on. He's rushed for 490 yards this season, averaging basically 8 yards a carry. And again, he missed some time early.
That's what I remember, because the numbers didn't initially pop off the way that I was expecting. Then I saw, in the first game that he came back, he has 150 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he went 190 last week. Yeah. So he's running into form. And then Ty Jordan over at West Mesquite, who's going to Texas, he's only had 37 carries this year, which kind of surprises me. He's averaging 8 yards carry as well, but they've used him a lot more as a receiver. He's got 30 receptions for 330 yards this year. So they've used him in a variety of different ways. I think those guys are offensive MVP candidates, certainly, especially as we go on, because Seth McGowan's, as we get into district further, I mean, Poteet's only played one district game.
Yeah.
Look for them to kind of, use him as the workhorse. That's what they've done in previous years. They start him off on a light load, even when he was healthy, a light load. But then once you get in a district, like last year against West Mesquite, they get 37 carries. They just, they're going to use him more as the season goes on. Same with Ty Jordan. I just don't think that he's, they haven't had to use him as much as they've needed to. But as you get into the brunt of the district schedule, both those guys they're going to put up, more and more numbers. So. Those are two other guys, and obviously, we don't get to see the Texas Highs and the John Tylers and Shermans of the world. But I think between McKinney North, Poteet, and West Mesquite, and the numbers they've been putting up,
that's where the offensive superlatives are going to come from.
You kind of have your front runners right there.
How about on the anybody else, be it defensive or newcomer, anybody else from one of the other superlatives that leaps out as a potential candidate?
I think Jalen Hodo was the district defensive player of the year last year. He's putting up similar numbers.
Okay.
He's a guy that he makes big plays. I mean, last year he had 3 defensive scores for touchdowns, and he's just one of those guys that's always throwing the ball. He's averaging 9 tackles a game this year. I think he's certainly right there in consideration. Stephen Kirk is a guy also for Poteet. He's averaging 10 tackles a game just as a junior, a guy that wasn't really on the radar last year. But you talk about kind of newcomer of the year, potential, a guy that's putting up those kind of numbers on the defensive side of the ball, certainly is going to be a consideration for that.
Over in 7-5A Division II, Bryan, last year this was a fun little 3-horse race between Josh Foskey, Ryan Depperschmidt, Carson Collins, as far as players that we figured would factor somewhere into that MVP race. Was it Foskey that wound up winning it?
No, it was Will Harbor.
Will Harbor, well, screw me. There you go. Will Harbor, still in consideration again this year, but as we've mentioned on the podcast, the story has been the rise of Frisco High. So a return to form for the Raccoons, and it feels like right now with them being the lone, because they've already played 4 district games in the schedule at this point, because they got started really early, because it's got 9 schools in it and whatnot. So it feels like though we're setting up for an MVP from Frisco. So what's been kind of your read on who could very well be that MVP, and if there's anybody else maybe from one of those other programs that might be able to work their way into the mix?
Well, one with the stats that pop out at you are Bryson Clemens, running back with over 700 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, averaging almost 8 yards per carry. Because Frisco loves to run the ball. It's no surprise, wing T offense, and he's that lead guy. But what we were talking about earlier, the guy that's really made the biggest impact and made them so diverse and not so one-dimensional like they have been for most of this decade is Chase Lowry. And I saw him, against Reedy. Without him, they don't beat Reedy. Without him, they don't make that big catch on 3rd and long with a few minutes left in the 4th quarter. Without him, he's not, he's busting out 59-yard touchdown catches to start the game against, probably your biggest rival in the district in Reedy. He has 24 catches, over 600 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. Not one receiver in Frisco has done that in quite some time.
Yes.
What was the stat we were talking about?
Yeah. So Chase Lowry has 7 receiving touchdowns. I was curious when the last time, because Frisco is we on the store wing T. They don't throw for too many touchdowns. So when was the last time that Frisco exceeded 7 passing touchdowns overall for a season? You'd have to go all the way back to 2013, the last time that happened.
Yeah.
I would have bet a decade before that.
So Chase Lowry, it really is kind of validating the strides that they've made. Not him, but Kari Green as well. Just validating this passing. Because you have now. Chase Lowry. Last time that Frisco had a receiver that was in the top 15 in the area in receiving yards, it's not something that you see all too often. And it's been such a special presence for them in transferring from Prestonwood Christian.
And Kari Green, first year as a quarterback, he has 1,000 yards through the air.
Newcomer of the year, maybe?
13 touchdowns. Oh yeah, for sure. But still, man, when you have a player like Will Harbor, who literally does it all, he's the best linebacker in this district. Okay, he has 63 tackles for Reedy. And then, they use him in so many different instances on offense, whether it's goal line, whether it's other short yardage, or, I'm talking Wildcat quarterback. They've used him that capacity since the sophomore year. They even threw him out there on 1st and 10, when they were down 15-0 against Frisco, deep in their own territory. It's like, hey, we need a couple first downs. Go out there, Will. And then, he had a big game against Denison, had a couple touchdowns. I remember seeing Matt Stepp was tweeting a lot about Will Harbor and his impact on his game that he brings for Reedy, and he's also the kicker. You know, he's a very accurate kicker, and he's an extra guy essentially on kickoffs. Because when you think of kickoffs, the kicker's not going to make plays. No, that's the baddest defensive player in the district right there, and you got to watch out for him because he's going to if he doesn't boot a touchback, he's coming for you, and he's probably going to make a tackle on his own kickoff, man. If that doesn't scream MVP, I don't know what does, but especially if Frisco is 10-0 and undefeated, you got to give it to someone from Frisco. And there's 3 guys that are deserving. You know, Chase Lowry is probably number 1 out of those 3.
One other name, it's not for a program within the district that we cover routinely, but one that's going to work its way into the mix is Grayson Thompson with Denton Braswell. Yeah. A Braswell team that still remains to be seen, but could very well be maybe the second best team in the district. They already beat Lovejoy. They did lose to Frisco, albeit a fairly competitive game. Yeah. But yeah, Grayson Thompson, he's currently number 3 in the area right now among 5A programs in passing yardage. 1686, 16 touchdowns, does have 5 picks, but nevertheless, though, I mean, it's a massive step forward that program has taken, and he's been right at the center of it. So, yeah, I mean, if they go on to beat Reedy or whatever, and they can get that number 2 seed, then you could very well see Grayson Thompson working his way into that mix. Maybe his offensive player
of the year. Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Let's see. So yeah, that is at least a look at kind of what how some of the early superlative races might be shaping up, at least from our vantage point. You know, we don't vote on these. We vote on the all-area team, our own all-area team. But as far as the all-district list and all that, coaches take care of all that stuff. But nevertheless, that's kind of where we're at on our 5A districts. We still do have some stuff over in 6A to discuss, and we will do that on the other side of this break. First, got to shine that student-athlete spotlight. And speaking of 6A, I was out in Marcus for a chat with the Marauders quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier. He's one of the names that we will surely mention in our next segment as far as potential MVP candidates out of District 6A. Here's a look at what Garrett had to say after a word from this sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. We are out here at Marcus High School talking with quarterback Garrett Nussmeier of the Marcus Marauders. So I guess, yeah, you guys have won now 4 straight ever since that season opener against Bowie. Just talk a bit about kind of thinking on this hot run you guys have been on. What do you attribute to kind of the turnaround?
Yeah, you know, I think we just came after week 1 and it was a rude awakening to us. You know, we put in a lot of work this offseason to get to a place to where we can compete at a high level in our district. And you know, I still think we're at that level, and you know, I think after that loss, you know, we kind of sat there and said, okay, we've got to work harder. You know, Arlington Bowie was a great football team, and you know, I think they really showed us, hey, okay, this is what we're going to have to be like if we want to win in the playoffs and accomplish our goal that we've been working for. So it's been great ever since week 1. So
now talk about specifically on the offensive side of the ball, what has kind of changed since that opener, and just talk about the level you guys are executing at.
Yeah, I think for one, you know, it's confidence level. You know, for a lot of us, it wasn't my first game, but it was some of our first games, you know, playing at a varsity level. So, you know, there's a lot of miscues. You know, you could just tell that we weren't on the same page, and a lot of us were a little nervous. So, you know, as the season has gone on, we've just continued to build confidence and continue to play together as a team and just build the chemistry. And so it's been great.
Now, you guys, now this is your second year as the starter. So
yes,
thinking back to, I guess, your sophomore year, kind of going through this varsity thing for the very first time. As a junior, kind of how much has the game changed in 1 year's time for you?
Yeah, I think the game has completely changed for me. It's kind of slowed down a little bit. It's helped a lot with me as far as reading defenses and knowing where to go with the football. As far as the team level, you know, we have a completely different team this year than we did last year. You know, the heart and soul of our team is together. We're one team, and we have an attitude that really wants to go win football games. So,
when you think back to your first year as a varsity quarterback, kind of week to week, what was kind of the biggest challenge getting used to quarterbacking at the varsity level for the first time?
Yeah, you know, I think with last year, the craziest part about every week is, you know, playing in the highest level of high school football in the country, in my opinion. You know, something new is thrown at you every week, and every down there's going to be something you've never seen before. And so, you know, you get to play against these good teams like we play against, like Flower Mountain and Hebron and Coppell and Louisville and all these guys. You know, we play in a really great district against some really good teams. You play against some real athletes. So
it helps to have it's been a very balanced and deep receiving core for you this year. I mean, I was talking with Coach Atkinson after the win last week. I mean, you guys are spreading the ball around. It's really you never know who's going to go off each night. So just talk about that balance and how much easier that makes your job.
Yeah, you know, kudos to them. They're making me look really good right now. You know, they're making plays, and you know, I trust every single one of them out there. There's no doubt in my mind, that the game on the line, I'll throw it to any single one of them. So they're working hard, in practice. They've been working their butts off all season. Our chemistry is through the roof right now, and we're just going to keep building on this confidence. So
now you guys, last season you guys were unfortunately the odd man out in the playoffs. You had 5 good teams vying for 4 playoff spots.
Right.
So kind of talk just from an expectation standpoint. I mean, what are some goals for this season for you?
Yeah, the number one goal really that we've had in turning this place around and turning the mindset of this program around, Coach Atkins has talked about is his goal is just to win in the playoffs, not just to get to the playoffs, but to win in the playoffs. And there's no doubt in my mind that we have a good enough team this year to accomplish those goals. I think we have a good enough team to win district. We just got to go out and do our thing and take it game by game and just to play each play with 100%.
I just wanted to quickly pivot off the field because you do come from a football family.
Yes,
for those who don't know, your dad Doug was a longtime NFL quarterback and currently the tight ends coach for the Dallas Cowboys. So
Yes,
I mean, just talk a bit about how much did that kind of help just growing up and getting you acclimated to the game of football, having someone in the family
no doubt,
show you
no
the
doubt.
ropes like that.
Yeah, it's helped me tremendously. He's been a huge role model in my life and somebody that I've always had to to ask questions to, and he's always given me really great answers as far as leadership and on the football field. Not just X's and O's, but also touch and stuff like that. So it's been a huge help, and Coach A's been really great, and him and my dad have a good relationship. They talk all the time, so it's almost like I have 2 coaches. And Coach A's a really great coach also. So it's really good to have those 2 great coaches in my life.
Was there ever then a doubt that you were going to play quarterback once you started taking football seriously?
Ever since I was little, I was always the quarterback. I was flag football, whatever. I played receiver for 1 year, but everything else has been quarterback, and he never forced that upon me, but it's just kind of the way things went. So I'm truly thankful.
But if there was like a secondary position, is there another on the field that you feel like you could have success at?
I think I would play receiver if I had to play another one.
Inside or outside, or?
I'd do a little slot, a little Julian Edelman type thing.
Nice. I'm a Patriots fan, so I like to hear that.
Okay.
So now, obviously looking ahead now to in the weeks to come, the schedule's going to get pretty fun these next few weeks for you guys. You got a big one against Hebron on Friday, then Capel the next week, then the Mound Showdown the week after that.
Yes,
so how anxious are you guys for this stretch of the schedule? It's really going to kind of test whether or not you guys can be a legit playoff team.
Yeah, no doubt. We're really excited for the way these next 2 games are going to go. We're trying to keep that excitement controlled and in a bottle and just focus on week by week. So right now, I'm not going to talk too much on who we got the week after that or whatever. Right now my focus is Hebron, and this team's focus is Hebron, and we just take it week by week, and I'm confident in the things we can accomplish.
Well, awesome, Garrett. I appreciate you taking the time to chat, man.
Yes,
this has been Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback for the Marcus Marauders. And yeah, man, appreciate you taking the time to talk on the podcast, and best of luck to y'all going forward.
Sir, thank you.
Big thanks to Garrett Nussmeier for taking the time to chat for our Student Athlete Spotlight as we continue to take a look at some early superlative races within our respective districts. Who could be some potential award winners by season's end? We were just talking back to Garrett Nussmeier, so let's quickly touch on 6-6A and a look at the Louisville ISD and Capel district, since that's where the superlatives are likely going to go. Heading into the offseason and whatnot. So let's see. All right. So Garrett Nussmeier is among several candidates for me. This is a district where it doesn't feel like anybody has truly separated themselves yet as far as a home run pick like a Marvin Mims or anything like that. You do have a very fascinating race shaping up for the district's passing title between the aforementioned Garrett Nussmeier and Flower Mound's Blake Short. They are currently within just 5 yards of each other overall. Short having passed for 1420 and Nussmeier for 1415. Blake Short has 16 touchdown passes. Garrett Nussmeier has 15. The Mound Showdown still is yet to happen. That game is going to be there's going to be as much juice behind that game as there's been in some time. So hey, who knows? That could very well be the platform for those two to shine and make one case over the other. You've also got a guy like Tyson Edwards from Marcus, who is just getting the latest in a long, lengthy line of workhorse backs that have just totally dominated for the Marauders. Tyson Edwards, who's currently 794 rushing yards, just over 7 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. He's also second on the team in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Total almost 1,100 yards of offense and 12 touchdowns. Certainly a guy who deserves some sort of recognition for his impressive season. I'm really anxious to see how the newcomer of the year superlative shakes out. And it was one that went to 2 players last year, Walker Polk, Armani Winfield, Isaiah Bryan. Now that I think about it, there was, I guess they split up into offense and defense. So you had Walker Polk with Capel, Armani Winfield with Louisville, Isaiah Broadway with Hebron. So there's plenty of worthy candidates this year, and that's where you look at the receiver position, some of the first year names that have really stood out there. The leading receiver in the district, Anthony Black from Capel, a kid that had a lot of fans fanfare, a lot of buzz leading into the season, and has certainly lived up to that hype. He's got 442 yards and 5 touchdowns, almost 20 yards per catch. So obviously, ball gets in his hands, great things are happening. J. Michael Sturdivant, who is over at Marcus, he's currently number 2 in the district in receiving with 429 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Isaiah Stevens at Louisville, who's emerged as a really worthy complement to Armani Winfield, who won this newcomer award last year. Stevens has a nose for the end zone. He's currently tied for 5th in the area with 8 receiving touchdowns among 6A programs. And then, of course, if you're talking Louisville, you got to mention Taylon Green, quarterback, transfer from Allen, who's having a great year and helping again kind of add this new dimension to that Louisville passing attack that they haven't had in some time. On track to be one of the better passing years for that program. He's at 1,058 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, only 1 interception. You can make a worthy case for several guys in that district when it comes to newcomer of the year. As far as how defensive player of the year might shake out, Walker Polk won newcomer of the year last year. He's probably going to have a defensive player of the year under his name by the time he graduates. Whether it's this year remains to be seen. He's making a great case, though. He is on pace for 140 tackles at linebacker at the heart of that Capel defense. He's having a great year. Louisville's defense has been awesome. They were the recipient of this award last year with Caden Johnson. Dylan Adams has picked it up really impressively for Louisville's defensive line. He's been named the team's defensive player of the game the past 3 games. So that's consistency right there. And then you got Hebron, who might have the best overall defense in the district, and then guys like Darius Snow, Carter Norrie, Ben Rutherford, all having great years. You could give it to any number of players in this district. So yeah, it feels like a district where we're probably going to end up with a lot of picks when all's said and done. But so that's kind of a look at kind of how at least things are shaking out in 6-6A up to this point. Over in 9-6A, Brian, we were talking earlier, and despite all of the the heavyweight programs, at least from an enrollment standpoint in this district, it doesn't feel like right now through one half of the season there was a runaway home run slam dunk pick for MVP.
There isn't. The first one that comes to mind is obviously Raylan Sharp, because when you think of MVP, you think, okay, it's got to be someone from Allen. Look at years past.
Number 3 ranked team in the state. They always say whether it's MVP, like last year it was Grant Tisdale, but I mean this isn't a district that is automatically kowtowed to Allen when it comes to that MVP superlative. Matt Gaddick with McKinney won it his senior year.
Well, when you run for 600 yards in a game.
Miklos Smalls with Plano East won it his senior year, so they will go a little bit above and beyond because it's Allen, and yeah, everyone knows that Allen's the best team in that district every year, but Allen has a lot of worthy selections for these superlatives.
They have 6,000 students, but only 1 vote in the all-district meetings, so they can't railroad their way through all their awards there.
That doesn't matter in those all-district meetings.
But the 2 guys that maybe preseason MVP favorites you would have thought would have been Sharp and E.J. Smith, a Jesuit, and they both missed time.
Yeah.
So you got to account for that too in an MVP vote. Granted they without Sharp they almost lost to Capel, which kind of
it helps support the whole just as far as impact to a team and whatnot. Yeah.
But and how valuable he is, which he is obviously, but he hasn't necessarily been the same. You told me some eye-popping stats with his rushing game.
Because I feel like there needs to be because Raylan Sharp has had a fine season, no doubt. I don't want to make it sound like he's underperformed or anything. It's the thing with Sharp is he's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the area, maybe the state, in terms of just raw speed. You can argue that he is the fastest quarterback in the state when you look at what he does, hurdling on the track and whatnot. But nevertheless, he missed that game against Capel because of an ankle injury, and I feel like when you look at his rushing numbers, they're not going to just jump off the page at you. But I think that might be kind of by design. So against Cedar Hill in their opener, Raylan Sharp carried the ball, at least he was attributed with 9 carries for 134 yards. Great game, obviously. He has only logged 8 rushes since then for only 6 yards, so that's sacks and whatnot. But the thing is, but just actually having seen the games, they're not calling design runs for him, as much, which tells me that, perhaps the ankle is still something that he's working through. Plus, they haven't really felt a need. It's kind of like with McGowan. They haven't really had a need to really divulge that part of his arsenal as much because they just when you're up 4 to 5 touchdowns a lot of the time, it just isn't necessary. They can get by with Selden Manning and Jordan Johnson and have Sharp feed the ball around to the Green Twins and Darian Sherfield. They haven't really had to unlock that aspect of his game, but it is there, and when it is there, then it's devastating because he's a player who averaged almost 15 yards a carry last year, albeit in mop-up duty, but he's already torched a Cedar Hill team that's ranked among the state's top 25. He can run, and that aspect of his game is so devastating that you've really only seen him play, though, I'd say maybe about up to like 60 to 75% of his potential, because that running aspect is so important to his overall skill set.
Now, do you think he's not running because of the ankle injury, or which one do you think is the biggest factor?
I think it's a combination of like they want him to be they want to heal the ankle. I don't think the ankle is 100 or hasn't been 100%, but also it's just it's by circumstance. They just haven't had to, because again, they can still blow these teams out in the first half by just simply doing everything else, and they haven't really been in the situation where they need to have him run the ball. So, but yeah, I mean, it does. If you're just going off of just sheer counting stats and the sort of and making those cases for MVP. I mean, because the guy that we were talking about, I guess, as a comparison for Raylan Sharp was Prosper's Jackson Berry, who's having a terrific year. I mean, Allen and Prosper both undefeated so far. They've shown to be the clear-cut top two teams in the district. But the numbers for Jackson Berry, solid. 1,075 passing yards, 13 passing touchdowns, 2 picks, 180 rushing yards. 5 rushing touchdowns.
Really good numbers, but MVP numbers? But in this district, maybe so. Because like I said, with Sharp missing some time and his numbers haven't jumped out at you, and E.J. Smith's numbers aren't really jumping out at you, it maybe allows a guy like Jackson Berry, who really is having a great year. And I brought this up to you, if Jackson Berry doesn't get, MVP or Offensive Player of the Year or whatever, what about Newcomer of the Year?
Yeah.
But there's other guys in this district that are more than worthy of that too.
So and you also have to factor in the context of like Allen and Prosper, not only are they undefeated and blowing teams out, like Prosper's up by an average of 24 points at halftime this season. So these guys, like, while the numbers might not jump off, well, yeah, of course, because they're playing 2.5 quarters most times. So it's where you see like guys like McKinney North and whatnot, it's because they're playing all their guys all the way to the finish line. But you mentioned, a potential Newcomer of the Year, and the district's leading passer, rusher, and receiver are not from Allen or Prosper. They're from McKinney. McKinney has had a...
2 of them are sophomores, right?
I believe so. I wish Kendrick were here to verify that and whatnot, but nevertheless...
I know the running back's a sophomore.
Yes. Quarterback, I believe, is too, Samson Nazarko. Quarterback Samson Nazarko, he's having a great year. Running back Lamaria Ransom, he's doing the same on Isaiah Rojas. So it feels like Newcomer of the Year, you could give it to all 3 of them for that matter. And
it's a co-Newcomer of the Year, all 3 are McKinney.
They're all, again, they're leading the district in their respective categories, and now obviously you have to factor in the non-district schedule that they played contributing to that. For a guy like E.J. Smith, he's going to have his chances because, he was sidelined for the early part of the season. We know that when healthy, what a difference maker he can be for that Jesuit offense. And Jesuit still has to play Prosper on Friday, still got to play Allen, so these guys will still get their chances to kind of puff up that resume a bit more in the coming weeks as some of the more marquee matchups in the district materialize. At least right now it feels like, if you have to go MVP, maybe Sharp versus Berry, and maybe a slight edge to Berry right now, but still obviously plenty more to be written in that battle. Then on the defensive side of the ball, that's been one that Allen's traditionally fared pretty well in, as far as history saying that it's going to come from somebody with Allen, and not just that, somebody from the Allen defensive line. It's been a positional group that, whether it was, Levi Onzurike, last year with Jaden Jernigan, Byron Bonds a handful of years ago, Allen has a long lineage of standout defensive linemen. And you look at a guy like Elijah Fisher and just the monster year that he's having, making the move from tight end to defensive end and kind of becoming one of the centerpieces of that Allen pass rush. Feels like he's a name to watch for as far as the Defensive Player of the Year goes. And then I'm sure somebody from Prosper, whether it's Aiden Ciano, whoever.
Aiden Ciano's a stud. The middle linebacker, he's really good, but I don't know if they can beat the Fisher guy from Allen, but the Prosper defense is legit. No matter what has been said about them in the coming week, in the previous weeks, they may not be the best defense in the state. They may not be quite Allen, but that is a really, really good defense. Aiden Ciano's a really good player too.
Yeah, for sure. You can make cases for lots of good players in this district for that. Devin. 10-6A.
Oh, God, do we have to?
Oh, come on now.
A district where
you guys should be proud.
There's plenty of parity in this district. We're not sure what type of parity, but nevertheless, it's shaping up to be one of those districts, though, where there's going to be a lot of, kind of like we're 9-6A, where there's really no one that's separated from the pack in any of these categories. A lot of guys that are in candidacy really close in it in terms of their overall statistical impacts. So, dude, this has been a really difficult district to predict week week in, week out. Who knows who the district favorite is right now and just in the grand scheme of things, but who do you foresee as kind of the superlative candidates?
I think Kamar Wheaton over at Lakeview is, he missed their loss to North Garland. He's come back and they've won both games, beat Wiley last week. If you go by, 247sports.com, he's rated as the number 1 running back in the country for the class of 2021. Wow. Just amazing speed, a track star. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a difference maker, and I think he's probably the front runner. A guy to keep an eye on, though, is Sean Coleman, the running back at Saxe. They came in, Saxe had all sorts of question marks at the running back position coming in when Miles Nash transferred right before the season started. They didn't know who was going to be that guy. They were going to use 4 or 5 different guys. They still have 4 or 5 different guys, but some are young, some have been banged up. Sean Coleman went 36 carries for 228 yards against Naaman Forest. And then last week against Garland in the game I got to see, he goes 19 for 243. So, he's shown the ability to be that workhorse. He's been, as their passing game is still developing, he's been kind of their go-to guy. And I think if not district MVP at this point in time, he's certainly an offensive MVP candidate right there. On the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of hard to tell. There's a lot of guys that are kind of on the same level. You look at a guy like Jordan Brooks, Saxe, one of the leading tacklers over there, who makes plays. Rowlett has a couple guys in the secondary that are up there, but again, there's nobody that just jumps out at you. There's not like, okay, this is a D1 prospect here or there that's shining like D1 prospect.
Not a Hunter Spears.
yeah. It's just kind of across the board. You got. If I took all 8 teams, I could probably come up with 25 guys with really good stats, but very similar stats.
Yeah.
So nobody that just kind of goes out there. Newcomer of the year is the one that's interesting because. I saw Garland play on Thursday. Yeah. Garland is 60% sophomores.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, man. Yeah,
and Sergio Perez, their quarterback, is throwing for 1,500 yards. Yep. Jayshawn Powers, their running back, 125 carries for 648 yards. Jordan Hudson is 48 catches already, for 768 yards and 11 touchdowns. And again, all those guys are sophomores. But I'll tell you, the most impressive sophomore I saw was Jalil Brown at South Garland. Wow. Okay. On Friday night against Rowlett. South Garland is trying to get their program back to to a winning level. They've endured their share of struggles, but if I told you, Jalil Brown, the defense, you don't have a lot of weapons on South Garland's offense, so they know that he's going to be getting the ball. 93 carries. 951 yards.
I'm seeing right now that's the area leader. Wow.
Yeah, he's averaging over 10 yards per carry.
Goodness.
And opposing defenses, I talked to Doug Stevens after the game, at Rowlett. He said, yeah, we knew he was going to get the ball. He's just kind of tough to stop. And he really is. He gets yards after contact. I was very impressed, with him. And he also plays quarterback sometimes.
Okay.
And he's thrown 3 touchdown passes this season. That's not their ideal situation because, ideally speaking, they want him, hand the ball to him in the backfield to get him to get ahead of steam and use that power because he's a really strong runner. But yeah, there's a lot of talented sophomores out there. That newcomer of the year is going to be a battle.
Do you think it's something system based? Because didn't Jaquarian Turner, another South Garland player, wasn't he like among the area leaders in rushing for a hot minute?
He was, but that was a totally different offense. They have a new coaching staff this year.
Well, there you go.
And so they changed. Coaching staffs changed offense. Basically last year it was give Jaquarian Turner the ball, and that was all they did. Yeah. And so even he was effective at times. But they've got a different system now, and it's more diverse. Like I say, they've got 2 other guys that have more than 40 carries on that South Garland team. So he's just a good player, and sticking out as a bright spot on a team that's 1-5. But over there, I was impressed with him. I think when it's all said and done, Rowlett and Saxe are probably going to have the lion's share of the award winners. But again, it's so even right now, except for Kamar Wheaton. I think if Kamar Wheaton continues to do what he's capable of, I think he's kind of your favorite for MVP. Okay. But like I said, there's just so many guys that are so close together right now. It's just kind of hard to tell.
Lots of competition over in District 11-6A as well. We can close that out with a look at that. So yeah, I mean, you've got, obviously we focus primarily on the Mesquite schools, but if we're just kind of getting a sense of where things are leaning in this district with what Longview's done so far, kind of establishing themselves as the clear-cut number one in the district, and Rockwall, especially after last week over Horn as the clear-cut number two, it does feel like Haynes King kind of locked up that MVP with that performance against Rockwall. And then we'll see how much, if he misses any more time, but obviously we've spoken ad nauseum about Jackson Smith and Jigba and what he brings to the table at Rockwall.
Who in 6 games might put up the kind of numbers they can still win an award. So
it's nuts. But then you've got guys like I said, for newcomer of the year, the race between Braden Locke and Josh Hoover, with Rockwall's quarterback against Rockwall Heaths. But obviously for those Mesquite kids though, do you see anybody being able to factor in, or just how do you kind of see the 11-6A superlatives?
It's really, I think Haynes King, it's going to be tough to beat him out. He was an MVP last year. He's going to get MVP again this year. I don't see Longview, especially after they just dusted Rockwall.
Yeah, I feel like there's really much of a challenge left for them in the regular season.
That was, you never can tell. There's been stranger things have happened, I suppose, and injuries could always factor in.
No doubt.
But yeah, Longview is clear cut. I think Haynes King is certainly the favorite there. You mentioned the 2 quarterbacks over at the Rockwall schools.
Mm-hmm. They're currently 1 and 2 in the area in passing right now.
Yeah.
Just among 6A programs. You have Hoover number 1 with 2,007 yards, Locke with 1,877 at number 2.
Yeah. And so, and 11-6A in the past has done offensive newcomer of the year and defensive newcomer of the year. It's a battle between those two for offensive. Defensive, you look at a guy like Marquise Edwards, the linebacker at Horn, is just a sophomore. He has 62 tackles already this season.
Wow.
Kind of stepped in. A lot of people made, when Kendrick Blackshire transferred in the offseason, it's like, oh, that was our and they Horn has a tremendous linebacking core with Nick Garcia and Quavon Grant, guys like that. But Marquise Edwards has kind of come in there and made an instant impact, and leads the team in tackles. And so, as far as superlative awards, I think he right now would be a front runner for defensive newcomer of the year.
Okay.
As far as other superlatives, it's just kind of hard.
It's a really competitive district, man. There's a lot of good players in that district.
And Tyler Lee, Jamarian Miller, who made it with impact as a freshman last year as a running back, and Tyler Lee all of a sudden can pass the ball. They're 5-1, and their only losses to Poteet in a low scoring game, but. It's just, that's a very, very good district, top to bottom. And that's, you look at Mesquite, North Mesquite, and Horn. Chances are only one of those teams is to make the playoffs. Yeah. But if you shifted them to another district, maybe 10-6A, then maybe all 3 of those teams are in playoff contention until the very end. It's just, when you have the defending state champion, when you have a powerhouse like Rockwall and an upstart like Tyler Lee, it's a tough district across the board.
Feels like between 11-6A over in 6A and 5-5A Division I over in 5A, some very interesting discussions as far as, just 2 districts that are absolutely loaded with star power relative to these superlatives. And that is kind of a look at where we're at with all of our districts as far as some early superlative talk. And that'll wrap up this edition of the podcast. Devin and Bryan, appreciate y'all for swinging along. We'll be back on Thursday to break down our game of the week. You can go to the website starlocalmedia.com to vote on this week's poll. Got 5 solid games once again up for contention, and we'll be back on Thursday to break it down. Folks, enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk to y'all later.